Welcome back to another episode of Allowed to Ask, a First Rounds on Media production. One thing I always hated about dating was the endless back and forth once you've matched with someone on an app. I wasn't looking for a pen pal, and I'm guessing you're not either. That's why I'm so excited about First Rounds on Me, an app that ditches the small talk and gets straight to the point of what apps are all about, meeting and connecting with someone. With their 24-hour chat feature, once you match and plan your date, English, with their 24-hour chat feature, once you match and plan the date, you only have 24 hours to chat before meeting up. This way you can skip the endless texting and save the real getting to know each other moments in person. Check it out and use code A2A, capital A, number 2A. We need a new code. It's too hard to explain. To get 1 month free of Frome's Terracotta subscription. We're so excited to be sitting here with another First Rounds on Media girly, Carleigh Ferrante, who's the host of the podcast Mostly Dating. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm so excited to chat with you both.
So excited. I've honestly been looking at your content and your podcast for a while. So to see that you were also a First Rounds on Media girl was very exciting.
Yes,
and we're happy to
love
have you
that.
here.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about how you got into this space. Like, I feel like I know what your work is, but I don't know much about you as a person. So we would love to know more.
Yeah, so there's a long backstory, but I'll try to sum it up. I can definitely be a talker.
No, keep
Sure,
it.
you can too.
Please.
Podcasters here.
Yeah.
Okay, so I started my podcast back in 2020 when probably everybody was starting a podcast. It was COVID.
But honestly, I feel like you were early on still.
Pretty early,
Yeah.
yeah. And I started it with my best friend. And at the time, we called it Mostly Balanced.
Mhm.
And it was very broad. It was sort of like wellness, lifestyle. We would have fitness experts, therapists, just like all different people. And like we were very also into like manifestation and spirituality. And we just covered like all topics, which was great for us because we both had so many different interests and we like talking to so many different types of people. But we found we always came back to dating. That was like the topic we would always talk about the most, especially
So
if we
easy to talk about.
Yeah. Especially if we had a solo episode where it was just us. This was a best friend who I met when I was 27. I'm 35 now. I met her when I was 27 and we kind of bonded over like similar relationship patterns and dating patterns. And so we found that our listeners loved those episodes as well, where it was all about dating or we would have a dating expert. So we kind of like niched down to that and started like really a dating podcast.
Nice.
Fast forward to about a year ago, she decided she didn't want to do the podcast anymore. She works full
She
time.
ditched you?
Yeah.
You did it though for like 4 years.
We did it together for like over 3 years.
That's a lot of episodes.
Yeah, almost 4. Yeah.
Can I just ask you one question?
Mhm.
Did you do this? Did you just like quit your job and get into the podcast, or you were working full time and doing this?
So we were both working full time. We met working together in advertising. So at the time we were both working in advertising. But I always had a passion, as you'll learn, I have a passion for a lot of different things. I went to school for writing and I always had a passion for that. So I was doing freelance writing also about dating and relationships and wellness and different things in that arena. Ended up starting to do that full time while doing the podcast. So my worlds were kind of like coming together. Whereas
they were meshing.
and she stayed in advertising and she just sort of was at a crossroads where like she wanted to pursue that and she didn't feel she had the capacity to do both. So I was
envious that you're still doing it.
I think sometimes like I'm like, you have to come back on as a guest at some point because like the people miss you, and she was a great co-host. But at the time it was like, I mean, you and I were just talking about, you did a solo episode recently.
Yeah, it's
and
really
so at the
hard.
at the time I was like, ooh, solo hosting. It's like it felt intimidating. So I ended up chatting with a few people that I knew in the space who were solo podcast hosts. And like, I kind of switched my mindset to being like intimidated to just being excited. And then I took it over about a year ago. I rebranded to Mostly Dating and it's been great. It's grown so much.
You got to change your email. It's still Mostly Balanced.
I know. I think about it every time I give my email to somebody.
The domain.
It's pretty easy. I'm like one of those people where there's something that's so simple and for some reason I like just don't do it.
Yeah, it's one of those things that you just like need to check off your list, but you can't get yourself to do.
Now I'm probably going to do it because I just got called.
I'll remind you honestly after. That's so exciting. So when did you go full time doing this then?
I took over like solo probably exactly a year ago, January 2024. But at that point, I really focused on like Instagram and social content and kind of put the podcast on the back burner. And then probably only a few months ago, I picked it back up. So now I'm just really kind of going full speed.
That's so nice.
Your Instagram is great.
Oh, thank
tell
you.
That you're a writer.
You're so good with like the really short clips and the really long captions. Like hooked. I'm in. Like then your engagement's so sick.
I have a hard time like cutting those captions down to the limit that they have to be.
Well, you're a writer. You want to keep making it long. When you and your friends started the podcast, were you both single? Like, did you have like crazy dating stories? Like, why? Like, how did you? I know you guys said you naturally progressed to talk about dating, but like, were they about your lives or more just so general advice?
A combination. It was kind of great because we were both in such different places in our dating life. So she was in a serious relationship and I was single, and I had been single for a few years with some shorter relationships, but nothing super serious.
Yeah.
And she's always been a relationship person. Like I don't think she's ever been single for more than like 6 months.
She's single now?
No, she's married now.
Oh,
she actually just had a baby.
Oh, very exciting.
But so it was great because I felt like we started getting listeners who were single, listeners who were in a relationship, listeners who were married, and and like they felt like they could relate to different aspects of us.
Different
so that's
takes,
like that's why like right now I like to have guests who are in different relationship places as well because I like having those different perspectives.
Right.
I'm in a relationship now, but at the time I was single.
I was going to ask you what your relationship status is.
I have a boyfriend now. Yeah.
Love. When you were...
There's that question.
Checking them off.
What kind of dater were you when you were single?
Oh my gosh. I feel like I was every kind of dater possible. Have you guys ever heard of Logan Ury? Have you read her book?
I feel like
Hinge.
I feel like I DM'd her to come on the podcast.
Okay, if you can get her
on. Wait.
Yeah, I sent you her.
Yeah.
She's amazing.
Was she just on your podcast?
She was just on for the second time.
That's how I saw her because I saw you post her and I was like, oh, I'm going to
You already reached out to her though before, I think.
Yeah, and then
I saw you have to reach out a lot.
Well, no, it's annoying because if you don't follow each other, if you DM them, you can only send one message.
Is that a new thing?
Must be.
Okay, because that bothers me too.
Or it's a setting you do yourself.
Okay.
So like I'm so annoyed because like sometimes I say like I do this for business too. Like I'm like, oh, check out our website. And then I want to send another message with our website. And then I can't. So I'm like, fuck, I said check out my website and I didn't send my website. I don't know if it's a new feature, but yeah, sorry, go back to her.
So she is a relationship scientist at Hinge. And the reason that I just brought her up is because she wrote a book called How to Not Die Alone. And it's one of the best books that I read when I was single. It helped me so much. And you asked me what type of dater I was. She actually has this quiz that you take where then she breaks you out into these 3 different dating tendencies.
Yeah.
And the one that I got was called the maximizer. And what that means is like you always think there's going to be something a little bit better. And I feel like
I think that's how a lot of people do date, especially with the apps and stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think with
have you minimized?
Yes. So that actually helped me a lot. I was just telling her when I was chatting with Logan on my last episode with her is that when I read that, I noticed that I was a maximizer in like every area of my life. Like I would do it with jobs. I would do it with like apartments. Like I would get an apartment and then I'd be like looking at listings that night online. Like, oh, I wonder what else I could have gotten. So I really flipped my mindset and I was like, I think I just need to like focus more on when I feel a connection, even if it's not exactly what I thought it was going to be. I need to entertain
she literally changed your life.
She really did. That along with like interviewing so many people on the podcast and just like experiencing things in dating. So the type of dater that I was is like, even though like it might sound like with that maximizer mindset, I was going on like a ton of dates. I really wasn't. Like I was pretty intentional about the dates that I was going on, but I would just kind of like cross them off the list if I found like one little thing that I didn't like. And it wasn't until I stopped doing that I was able to really like make better connections and then eventually find somebody who I really hit it off with.
Yeah.
That's great.
It's interesting because when we first started this podcast around like a year ago, I was single. So like the podcast kind of started and the intention around it was like, I've had like the funny date stories and I'm very
single for like 7 years.
Yeah, so I'm like very out there. We had a lot of content, a lot of stories to rehash. And then like now I'm in a great relationship and it happens like a month after we launched. So we really shifted to be like not so much about like myself and like the stories. And I bring them up when it's relevant, but like more of getting advice from other people.
Yeah.
Which is like been a great turn of events for everyone involved.
You could still tell the old stories.
Trust me, they come up when it's relevant. Yeah. But like I feel like I've also told those stories a million times in my life where like I'm done telling them.
Yeah, same. Yeah. I also was single for probably like a 7-year period for the most part.
Same thing.
Yeah. But like I feel like that time is so important.
Yeah, and don't you feel like it helps you be a better partner in your relationship?
Yes, absolutely. I also think when I was in relationships, it was in high school and college. Like the second I graduated college is when I became single until
literally
now.
When you moved into the city.
Right. So like that was like 7-8 years ago now. And I feel like if I was single in college, it would have been different. I don't know. I feel like it was important for me, at least, to be single in my 20s.
Me too.
Because I feel like it's so different being single in college.
Uh-huh.
I don't know what I would have been like in college if I was single.
But we also learned a lot from doing this podcast, from having guests and speaking to people like you. And my whole mindset kind of changed a little too, the way I used to approach dating with her. So it's a learning curve for everyone.
Beautiful thing for our relationship.
Right.
To have this podcast, honestly, because she was so, and I'm curious like about your relationship with your mom, because I know you wanted to bring her on.
Yeah.
I hope she feels better.
Oh yeah, sorry. She was she was like so up my ass about dating, not in like a pressured way, more so like she was so focused on him. So she'd be like, well, did he text you? Well, did he like you? Like, you know,
and now in hindsight, I'd be like, who cares?
Yeah,
like,
it would make me think like, I don't even know if I like him, but my mom is asking me if he texted me and he didn't. So like she would get me so in my head. So like doing this and talking to people like now I'm in a relationship, but even like we had this podcast in the beginning stages of my boyfriend and I's relationship, and like she would stop asking those questions and she would stop putting that pressure on me.
Yeah.
I know, like 2 months into the podcast, we had boundaries all of a sudden. Started allowed to ask because she would call me from the Ubers on the way back from the dates and spew.
Wait, that's amazing.
Yeah,
I love
that's how we started it. And then
I didn't even realize I did that, honestly.
Yeah, usually 11:15. If she was on a date, I'd stay up a little late. Like 11:15, I'd get the call.
That's so funny.
What was your dynamic with your mom around dating? Because we always try to like encourage parents and moms to have conversations with their kids and vice versa, because like she always says like she has some friends who doesn't even know if like their kids date, and we're like, how could that even be?
Yeah, no, it's funny. I think that we kind of were on that end of things where
Interesting.
When I started my podcast, and she's like my number one fan, she listens all the time, and she would hear episodes where I would tell stories about dating, and she'd be like, you never told me that. Or like, I had a pretty like toxic relationship in my 20s, and I would talk about it on the podcast. She'd be like, why didn't you ever like come to me and tell me that? And it wasn't that like I couldn't, like I know that my mom and I are so close, but for some reason I just like, I had always been really closed off in that area. And I think the podcast
with everyone or just your mom or your family?
I think like everyone pretty much, except I have a twin sister, and so we tell each other
identical.
Yeah.
Well, that's
and what
so
is your twin sister? She's
also where I'm from, up in New Paltz.
Okay.
But yeah, so then I think the podcast honestly helped us like talk more about those types of things. But even when 2 years ago when I was dating and I was getting in the early stages with my boyfriend, like I was calling her after dates too, and I was telling her more about it, and I feel like we just started more communication around
like
it, and now I wonder
dialogue.
why we never did before.
Yeah, it's nice to have the conversation. I feel like some of my friends' kids maybe are really, really closed off, and as a parent, I mean, we're just well wishers. Like, I just want, for both of my kids. So it wasn't like I was prying, and.
Yeah, you weren't prying, but I also think like the whole point of our podcast too is not just for like single like 20-year-olds too. It's more so like a lot of like people her age listen.
Right.
To kind of
Mine too.
have those conversations. It's up to the parents and the kids to both make the situation not weird. And I think like I can speak from the kids' perspective. Like this is like your parents aren't like naive to dating. Like they were young once too. And maybe they're single now and they're dating.
Exactly.
Right. So having that conversation is so important and making it aware on the parent side that you can come to them.
Yeah.
Correct.
You were OD though, in a good way. But like, so you're giving advice all the time, which is amazing. What would you say is like your biggest thing you preach when it comes to dating, at least modern dating?
I think just communication in general. I feel like so many things, so many questions that listeners will come to me for, the answer is communication.
Right.
Like, whether it's like, how do I tell them I'm looking for a relationship? How do we define the relationship? What do I do?
Always about defining the relationship.
Yeah, it's like always comes down to communication. And that's something for me too that I've worked on and noticed. And I think that it's something you can always work on in your relationship.
I agree.
So at any stage, I think it's so important.
I agree. It's my favorite word. I always say it. It's so important. Like my boyfriend makes fun of me now because like I probably over communicate, but that's something I never did before in prior relationships. I used to kind of just like go into a shell to avoid an argument.
Yeah.
Also toxic, if you can tell.
You guys could do a whole toxic episode.
We really could.
We should.
really could.
But that's funny because like I think that might be a podcaster thing because my boyfriend tells me I'm like too good at communication.
Yeah, no, right. And it's funny because like I don't know about your boyfriend, but mine's like so private. Like I don't even say his name on the podcast. Like he's so private, so he can't wrap his head around the fact that like I talk about, he's like, you have a sex podcast. I'm like, if you listen, you know it's on a sex podcast.
Yeah.
Like, do we talk about sex sometimes? Yes. But
you were already doing it when you met him, right?
I was doing it, but like only for like a month.
Was he weird about it at all when you met him? Okay.
No. So that was like, the thing is like, I've also always like talked about dating on like, so I don't have like a following of my own that large, but like I used to always like on my close friends story talk about dates, make TikToks about funny dates that have happened. So I've always been very open about talking about dating. And I was like the friend that like my friends would go to for like the same thing with your mom, like the hard truth advice.
Right.
And I've said this before, but like guys I've gone on dates with would just like sound intrigued at first, but I think it was like scary to them, to be honest. And although my boyfriend doesn't like really get like how I do this, he like is intrigued and interested in like rooting from afar.
Yeah,
so like
I love that.
That's a win. Yeah. What does your boyfriend think about it all? What's he like?
The same way.
Yeah.
I was like, I would like not really bring it up on early dates for a little while that I had a podcast, just because like I don't know, I just felt like people might be weird about it.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I have a dating podcast. So I think I told him on like date 3, and he just had like the best reaction. Like he didn't really react so much. He just asked so many questions about
He probably
it.
already knew and looked you up.
And maybe, but I don't know. But ever since then, he's just been like the most supportive. I feel like that's something that I look for. Like it sounds so simple, but that's a huge thing in relationships. It's just support in any area, like with any passion or goal that you have. And like he'll send me like reels for like content ideas or like send me different things on Instagram.
So cute.
And he's the same way. Like he's also pretty private. I don't really like talk specifically about him so much on my podcast. I mean, I do a little bit, but he is like so supportive in it and was never weird about it at all, where I know some people would be pretty weird about their girlfriend.
Well, in the beginning, he might have thought he was content.
He definitely did.
Yeah.
Well, because there
It's
actually
so
was like a funny situation where we had a talk, I think, on like our 3rd date where he asked me to be exclusive. And at
Third date?
See, reaction. That was my reaction.
What?
So he asked me to be exclusive on my 3rd date.
One of
on our
my
3rd
questions was like, how long do you think before he should be exclusive?
Yeah,
I literally 4 months in said to my boyfriend, like, we are official, period.
Well, did you have like an exclusive before official period?
We had so we got set up through a mutual friend.
Oh,
My
that's the
friend
best.
Jenny, her fiance is his best friend from growing up.
Okay.
And she's known both of us for years, but it just clicked to her like a year ago to set us up. And so she was like rooting for both of us. Obviously, she wanted it to work out. So she was kind of like our in-between source of like checking in, like, did we both like each other? She was like our vibe check. She said to him, like, well, are you seeing anybody else? And he was like, no. So she was like, you have to tell him. It's funny, I know this because he said like one night he was like, by the way, like, Jenny told me I have to tell you that like I'm only seeing you. And I was like, you could have just said that you're only seeing me. You don't have to say that Jenny told me to tell you this part.
It is
Yeah.
cute.
So like we had the whole like, I'm only seeing you.
Mm-hmm.
But then when it came to the part of like, are we boyfriend and girlfriend? I was like, yo, like this is official. Done.
But I actually thought it was stupid, like that whole step.
It's stupid, but like
she
I
needed it.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on labels?
I have so many thoughts on this, but
Let's deep dive.
When he brought up being exclusive on date 3,
I
was
love
like,
that. It takes all the pressure off. It's like, okay.
Yeah, it took it off, but also like I have like an avoidant attachment tendency. So
oh, interesting. I'm anxious. I'm like, give me all the love right off the bat, or I'm petrified.
But so I thought that was literally him asking me to be his girlfriend, and I was like, it's been 3 dates, and I kind of panicked because I didn't really see the difference between those two things. And then so
there isn't.
Well, so then on the next podcast episode, my at the time co-host and I talked at length about the difference between exclusivity and defining the relationship, and like why you don't need to have this exclusive thing, like why there shouldn't be a difference. And like, immediately he called me. And meanwhile, we're literally 3 dates in, and he called me and he's like, wait, I checked out your podcast. Like, was that about me? And was like, so he did like in the beginning think that he was like content, or that like I was, if we had a fight, I would talk about it on the podcast or something like that. I'm sure he was nervous about that. But at that point, he explained to me, and like a lot of other people did too when we had this podcast episode, that sometimes I guess people like to be exclusive before defining the relationship because they're not quite there yet of wanting this person to like be their girlfriend or their boyfriend, or like knowing them well enough to know that. But they also want to know that they're both like only really investing in each other and like feel strongly enough that they're gonna kind of like put the apps on hold, or like.
So do you think it should be a thing?
I don't necessarily think it should be, but I do I don't think I would need that, but I do understand and like respect that if somebody else like wants that reassurance, and I also am like super into them and wanting to see where it will go. I naturally probably wouldn't have been going on other dates anyway. It was just more so that like I panicked when it was brought up because I wasn't used to like that open communication.
Right.
But I also thought they were kind of when Danny said they were exclusive, I was like, all right, they're
Exactly.
boyfriend,
I didn't say
girlfriend.
exclusive. I said like we said we're only seeing each other.
Right,
But in my
yeah.
mind, I already knew that.
Right, but I also thought that was
confident.
one and the same. Like, obviously, if you're exclusive and you're only dating each other, you're kind of boyfriend and girlfriend, but maybe...
I think so,
agree.
too. I think a lot of people would agree with that. And I've had friends, too, where, like, they're exclusive and then a few months later, they're kind of like, when are you going to ask me to be your girlfriend? And the person's like, I thought you already were. Like, I think that communication.
I also think it's a generational thing too.
Yeah.
Like when I told my friends, like, oh yeah, we said we're only seeing each other. They're like, yay, but in their minds, we still weren't dating.
Maybe we need to make official T-shirts, and then
Yeah.
it's like how you know when you make
or we're
Bob
not
Mitzvah
official, but we're
sweatshirts.
happy, so shut the fuck up.
Right, like you need official T-shirts, and then you put it out there on like your Instagram.
No, literally. Were there any or are there any like controversial topics you feel like people should be having early on?
Like
And your boyfriend-
conversation?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily controversial, but there are definitely conversations I feel like you should definitely have before defining the relationship or before any stage of your relationship. I actually have like a lot of posts on like conversations you should have before defining the relationship or before getting engaged or moving in or whatever it is. I think before defining the relationship, and it also depends on age. Like if you're 22, I feel like there's less that you really need to talk about.
Yeah.
But if you're
It's like wear a condom. That's
but I think if you're dating for a specific goal, like getting married or having kids, like, those are all the things that you should talk about. I think I've found it really important to talk about like the role that family will play in your life, and obviously talk about different if you have certain religious beliefs or cultural beliefs or political things like that, I think are all really important.
Yeah.
But I also do find that even if those are like bigger topics, I think they come up pretty naturally if you're dating like the right person and you have that communication early on. Like, I would be pretty shocked if you were blindsided by like a political belief they had like 4 months in if you've been spending a lot of time with this person. Also, even things like for me, I love alone time. And so things like, how is that going to come into play in your relationship?
Very
I think we
similar.
are too.
She loves a lot. Me days.
Me day. Like, how much alone time do you like? Or what's like your typical day to day? Like, if it's somebody that you've just started dating and you're thinking about having a relationship with them, like, I'm like wholeheartedly, I believe that you shouldn't start a defined relationship with somebody if you've never just like spent casual time with them. If you've only been on these,
I just saw one of your videos that said that.
Yeah.
It's so
like just be home, watch TV,
Right.
like
hang
sit
out.
on your phone and like don't communicate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember
that
like
too.
pretty early on in my relationship with Sean, we were at his apartment one day, and at the time I was not living in the city. I was commuting from where I'm from. Like I was up there for about a year. When we first met, it was like at the tail end of that. And so I would work sometimes from coffee shops when I was in the city. And I remember I worked the day from his apartment when he was there. And it was like the first time that we were both like, we were just kind of like both
kind of like
working
hanging
from
out.
the same space. And that was like what solidified in my head. I was like, wow, I could definitely see myself in a relationship with this person because
You could be in their presence without like
exactly
being annoyed or something.
Yeah.
And I think also like in the earlier stages too, like once it gets to the point after like a few days, like you go to your apartment, you do more of like a casual order in. Like I don't even think that's necessarily a good indicator of like the spending time together because you're still planning the night. It's more so like spending like a lazy Sunday together where you can get a good or working from their apartment, right? That you can get a good taste of what that time is like. Love that. Do you have a question you want to ask?
No, we could keep
okay,
going.
lovely.
I could find many questions.
I know a lot of your content, you don't just talk about like dating when you're single. You talk about like actually dating when you're in the relationship. So like making sure like this not the spark stays alive, like how to keep your relationship interesting. So what would you say are some tips around like how to keep your relationship interesting, whether it's you're dating for a few months, a few years, whatever it may be?
Yeah, it's funny because I feel like it kind of contradicts what we were just talking about. But I think switching things up and doing like different things together, whether it's like learning something new together or doing a new activity together, like making a point to go out on dates, even though you're in a relationship, I think all of those things are so important. And like, look, you might literally have a couple months where you're not going out on a date night because you're both like super busy or whatever it is. But I think that those things are so important. And a lot of my background is like in my like writing career is in the wellness space. And so I've read so much research and so many articles about like the health benefits of relationships and healthy relationships. And I feel just like, there's like so many interesting studies on this. One of them is about loneliness and how it can take up to 8 years off your life. There's another one that's about how loneliness can be as detrimental to your health as smoking 15 cigarettes per day. Like these are crazy. And like, I don't know if you guys watched the Blue Zones documentary on Netflix, but they, it was this Netflix documentary about this guy, Dan Buttner, who went and studied the places in the world who have the longest living people and identified key similarities that they had in
Where is that, by the way?
There was like 6 different places. They're like, I don't know like the names of the exact places, but one of the key things was like the strength of their relationships. And that's something really that like I really love to like tie back to in my podcast is just like that all these different areas of your life, including like your health and well-being, are impacted by the state of your relationships.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And so it's like, so to me, I feel like strengthening that, like to your point, is so important. And even something as simple as like trying new things together, like listening when the other person, like I can find myself, my boyfriend's telling me a story. Sometimes I'm like so distracted and I'm doing something and I have to just like, okay, like come back.
Put your phone down and like
be present.
Yeah.
No, I've been busy watching about a guy who wants to stay young forever. I can't think of his name.
What is it?
And he spends $2 million a year. It was just in the paper.
Don't we all want to stay young forever?
Yeah,
I heard about this.
He's on all these supplements and he does, he even measures his erection at night and he does it with his son.
Does your erection get smaller when you get older?
What is
Wolf knows what we're talking about?
Yeah.
I've heard of this too.
It's like crazy. He's like 48.
Is it working?
And he's doing it now with his son, his 19-year-old son. Yeah. I mean, he has like 0 body fat. He's in perfect condition. His skin, he measures like
But that's just like not possible.
He's trying to stay young forever.
I have heard of this
But he's going to die eventually.
But you can make it last a little longer.
Yeah, he was actually the guy, I think he sold Venmo. I think he was one of the original.
So he's rich.
Yes. He's very, very wealthy.
Yeah.
So he spends $2 million a year to stay young.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
That's crazy.
So like Botox doesn't cut it for him. Not just Botox.
No, he's not masking it.
No, he's not masking
No.
it. It's internal. That's crazy. Do you think that people can still be lonely in a relationship though?
1,000%. I've definitely been lonely in relationships before.
Yeah.
But that's why I think that doing those things to strengthen it is so important. And like whenever I talk about stuff like that on my Instagram or on my podcast, I always like to caveat that like it does ebb and flow. Like sometimes my relationship is not the strongest thing in the world. And that's when like you have to come back to those types of things. Or sometimes one of you is going through something and one of you has to be more the supportive one. And like those things come in waves and nothing is like one size fits all. But I just think that if you're continuing to make a point to like always be getting to know each other, always be spending quality time together, and all those different types of things are so important.
Yeah.
Very.
I agree. I've definitely been lonely in relationships too. So sad.
But sometimes it's hard to get out though, because you just want to be in a relationship so bad. So it's kind of difficult.
Yeah. Well, which kind of brings me to another thought / question is like, are there any like early warning signs you think you could see while you're getting to know someone to kind of be like, okay, this is like going to go in a good direction, or maybe they'll love bomb, which I'm curious your thoughts on, or are they using me? Like, do you think there's any like signs people could look out for when they first start seeing someone?
I think a big one is just like how you feel when you're with them and when you're not with them is huge. And it's hard because some people do have like anxious tendencies. And so it's natural and you might feel anxious with even somebody who might be good for you. But I think if that's more overpowering than feeling excited about them or like at ease or calm, I think that anxiety should be more of like, oh, I'm so excited to see them again. Or like, I hope I see them again, but not like overwhelming anxiety of if you're going to hear from the person again. Or when you leave a date, if you're feeling super drained versus like energized. I think that that's a huge red flag. And then also just like classic things, like if you feel like they're not really listening to you or they don't remember things you're telling them. Like I would get on date 3 with someone and they'd be asking me all the same questions as on date 1. And I'm like,
it's like you already know. Also like look my job up online.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't ask me it again.
And keep eye contact.
I knew you were going to say that. I literally felt it coming out of you.
That was like our pet peeve.
It was so frustrating. And I always say like, you don't need to be like staring into my soul, but like, at least like let me know you're here with me. Like, and you can tell when someone's like blank eyed too, like, and just like nothing's going on in their mind. Like that was so important to me to like actually feel their attention and like not just like respond to my question, but also ask questions in return.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
I also
don't think I realized that was an important thing until like my later 20s. Like until I think I just like used to blab on dates, but I never used to be like, did they ask me any questions or did I just answer questions without them even asking.
Yeah, I think that like any type of like body language, those types of things are super important.
Yeah.
What are your tips to maintain independence in a relationship? So how you girls like your alone time, but you don't want to take too much alone time. Like, is
or
it a
offend
balance?
your partner in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think that happens a lot that people are together where one of them is really an alone time person and the other one like is fine without their alone time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I do think that is one of the conversations to have early on, because I think if you're 6 months in and suddenly you start like needing all this alone time that you weren't taking before,
Right.
it might be kind of like, oh, why do you
why do you want that? Yeah.
A little flag.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think like being clear about that early on, and then also just like setting it as a boundary and sticking to it, holding yourself accountable. Because sometimes, I mean, I love spending time with my boyfriend. So sometimes I'm like not giving myself as much alone time as ultimately I'll need. And then it will kind of build up and I'm like, oh my God, I need like just a me day. Mm-hmm. So try to not let it get to that point by like encouraging each other to do your own thing and taking time for yourself, like just because, and keeping up with your self-care, but also like making plans with your friends outside of them, or like finding a new hobby if you don't feel like you have something on your own. I think that's something you can do at any age.
Like finding something you're passionate about.
Do you live with your boyfriend now?
We don't like live together, but we do live together. You know what I mean? Like I basically live in
You're spending so much time.
Yeah, exactly.
But you also have an apartment in the city.
Yeah, so I have an apartment in Brooklyn and he has an apartment in Manhattan, and my lease ends in 2 months, so we're officially moving in together then.
Oh, so it's been said.
It's been decided. Yeah, it's been a journey of a conversation.
I was going to say, so how'd that conversation go?
Well, I was on an 18-month lease that I signed like pretty soon after we met, and so I did like try a couple times to see if I could get out of it early, just because now we've been dating for 2 years, and for me, like again with the timeline in my head, I was like, we're gonna move in together after 1 year.
Yeah,
and
it's always the next thing too.
Yeah,
you don't have the boyfriend, then you have the boyfriend, and it's like when you're moving in, then when you're getting married, when you're having kids, like, and then what's after that? What's after the kids part?
Life.
Yeah.
And it's good.
Grandkids.
Okay. Grandkids. Yeah. It's crazy. We were together. Where were we? We were somewhere together, and literally 3 people asked you. They were like, any grandkids? Where were we?
Are you an only child?
No, I have a brother. He's 2 years older than me. He's in a relationship
People ask me all the time. And you know what? I just want my kids to be happy. I'm not in a rush. I mean,
we were in Miami. We were talking to the people laying next to us in the pool, and they were like 2 different couples were like, "Are you a grandma and grandma?" And I was like, "I'm right here.
Yeah.
You can ask me if I have kids."
Not in a rush.
But yeah, so I had that in my head, and I also feel like, I don't know about you, but I do think that men like don't think about timelines as much as women do.
Absolutely not.
So it's kind of like I'm
rare
like, in
breed
my
if
head,
they do.
like calculating, like, okay, if we move in together at this point, that means we can get engaged at this point, and that we can have like a kid at this point, and that's like literally in my head. And so I think at some point I was like, I just like broke down this like fake timeline I had in my head to him, and he's like, okay, well that's like not really the way things work, and you have a lease and things like that.
Yeah.
So I think like just making, but that initial conversation is what then got us really talking about it.
So you were like, my lease is up.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's like, okay, well, my lease doesn't end until this month, this year. And so does that seem like it makes sense for you, for us to live together? And it was kind of like, I figured that because we already live together, like basically live together now. And so it was really easy.
Oh, he said, I figured that.
Yeah. He's
but
like,
he didn't voice it first.
Yeah. It's like, oh, I figured.
And you're like going in your head, like, should I talk about it now?
Exactly.
Not time to go.
Those are wild.
I'm like posting on Instagram, like conversations to have before like moving in together. And he's like, it's about me.
I saw that too, actually. That's why I was wondering, because we've never really talked about that, but it is a thing.
I honestly, sometimes I'll like look at the post and I'll just like be in the next room. I'm like, so I ask him a question. And like, this sounds like a good question for the post. But no, so those types of things, like, because sometimes, like I said, like people won't be having the conversations that they're both like, one of them is assuming something, the other one is then interpreting that. So I think that for us, like one time he said something
assuming.
Like, like one time he said something like, oh, like I could picture like maybe living in like this other city at some point, and like the fact that he used the word I really like triggered me, and I was like, what do you mean I? Like what about me? And like in other relationships,
Aren't we?
Yeah. And in other relationships, I wouldn't have like said that. But
right.
to him, like I said that, and he was like, oh, that's what I meant. And so now if he like ever says I'm like,
right.
We.
I wish I could be in a man's brain like for just a day.
Yeah.
Like I can't imagine like not having this like this
They don't think
pre-planned timeline in my head.
With everything too. Like I remember in early dating stages, I would be like early dating with somebody and they'd be going away for a week and I'd be in my head like, okay, they leave in 3 days. That means we have to hang out this day. Otherwise we're not going to hang out until then.
Same.
And then like they're not thinking that at all.
Wait.
Also, I think they need dating coaches.
Oh yeah.
I know.
Right? It would make life so much easier for everybody.
But I'm curious like what men's thoughts are on like women dating coaches for men.
Oh yeah.
Because I'm curious, like I feel like for
I don't think men put so much into it.
I don't think they think
no, they don't. They don't. But
They just like show up.
Yeah, they're just there.
How you doing?
No, but I do think that. I mean, I think anyone going to a dating coach is a good idea. But like, I would just love to have a man's brain for like a day just to see like how they think.
Yeah.
Because it's so polar opposite of how we are.
Well, because also the way you think and what's done, that it's not.
And
like
I'm
that.
generalizing.
It's
women.
probably like boop boop boop
Yeah.
boop boop.
Yeah.
And you're like,
they're like focused in the moment. Honestly,
Yeah.
I want to have a man's brain, just like be more present.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I say that every New Year's Eve, my resolution is to be more present because I'm always on to the next thing and checking something off my list.
Yeah.
That's the way I roll.
Yeah.
Mhm.
What's one thing you think everyone should try at least once while dating, just for the fun of it?
Oh.
Try once. Something dirty?
No, I literally.
Yeah, like it's
I knew your mind. We could take that sexual. We could take it appropriate. We could take it somewhere in between, wherever your mind went. Not your mind, you fucking freak.
I mean, this is like such a basic thing that everybody probably does, but I think even early days, I think you should travel together. Like I feel like before.
Oh, what's
things get
early
really
days?
serious. I would say before defining the relationship.
Before exclusive.
Oh my God, you missed that. You better go away tomorrow.
Have you guys traveled together yet?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I forgot.
Watch yourself.
I think that, I mean,
yeah,
it's not,
did.
again, it's not like a rule. I really don't like dating rules, but I think
Right.
that early on, I just think it teaches you so much about the person.
Yeah.
Traveling.
We were great travel companions,
Okay.
but like you really never know. You could learn a lot about someone.
Yeah,
And
if
it's-
somebody wanted to go to the airport like 6 hours early, I would be like,
Oh, so this is okay. So that's me.
Oh,
That's me. But that's just I was raised. Like my dad was getting us to the airport like way too early.
We were there when the
plane before was
us.
leaving.
Oh
It was
my
horrible.
God.
So I'm wired that way. But to toot my own horn, I can adjust. I can adapt. And I felt if I was going to the airport and I was cutting it close to when the plane was leaving and I was alone, I would be losing my mind. Like I would be so stressed. But if I'm with someone who like I trust and feel safe with, I was cooler about it.
That's true.
Yeah. So we were in Mayakoba. We were going to Mexico City then, and we were in insane traffic. My boyfriend would disagree. Cool as a cucumber. Like internally.
well, cool
I was like
for Danny.
cool for Danny. Yeah. But like so I adapted, but it was very interesting to travel together because my bag is always overweight. I will always be unzipping my suitcase and like putting clothes in my
We
tote
just had that
bag.
in Miami.
Yeah,
Where did you
always.
guys
We went to Mexico. We had a wedding in Mayakoba
Okay.
and then Mexico City.
Okay.
Always overweight. And I was like, this is going to be a great telltale sign to see like what he's like. He was cool as a cucumber. I'm like, you stand right there. This is not my first rodeo. I'm taking all the clothes out and putting it into my bag. And he was so chill about it. Dad, take notes because he freaks out at my mom.
My husband stands over me and kind of berates me, like as I'm moving stuff from one suitcase to the other. He's always like, "Let's just pay." I go, "No, out of principle, I'm not paying." So now I actually travel with 2 suitcases. So this way, I don't have to listen to him. I just pay the $35 for an extra suitcase, and I'm not shuffling things
So
around.
funny. I love that you guys both have that happen to you.
Right.
I never even
Unless-
check a bag. I just do carry on.
Oh, I could never.
I
Unless I travel with Danny. We just went to Miami, and the weather was bad, so we did so much shopping. We had to buy an extra suitcase.
Oh my God. I love
To get
that.
home.
For Valentine's Day, my boyfriend actually bought me a suitcase.
That's amazing. That's a great gift.
Great. I wanted it so bad, and he got it for me, which was so nice. And I was like, "Oh, why didn't you get the medium size for me?" He's like, "Are you fucking kidding me? You needed like the extra large one."
Our first trip was to Mexico too, which is
Really?
funny.
That's
We have
so
many
funny.
similarities. But before that, we had a situation where we were both flying out somewhere different on the same day randomly.
That's
But
weird.
his flight was super early. So I had slept at his place and he took an Uber to the airport. He ended up missing his flight. So he was still there when I got to the
Oh, that's
airport
so
for
funny.
mine. So we had this like whole airport morning and I felt like we kind of like checked off the travel box
That's
because we
awesome.
saw how each other were at the airport.
It's interesting. I feel like I've never really heard the advice like you should travel early on until recently. Maybe because I'm like more in the space and like I
Yeah.
hear it. But I don't know. I feel like I've never really thought about that, but it's so true. Also,
It's
it's
also
like
an age thing.
it's also
Like
a
when you're
trip.
22,
Oh, true.
23, you're not traveling with your boyfriend.
Exactly.
You're lucky.
It's
you
also
can
the
live
first
with it.
time like we spent like 8 consecutive days together. Yeah, because we went 7, 8, 7, 8. But yeah, it was like consecutive days together. Like we're together all the time, but like really like waking up, going to bed every single night for 8 days together, like every single plan, not one moment apart, was like a good test. And I wasn't sick of him. I don't think he was sick of me. We're still dating, so that's a win.
But I do think if it's early on, you'll probably have your first disagreement while you're traveling together, which is a good test.
Did we? I clogged the toilet, which was a whole different situation.
Oh my God.
That wasn't a disagreement. That was just like a pure panic moment on my end.
And what'd you do?
I called my mom. I called my
That was a whole thing. Like the maintenance guy had to come in from the
Oh my God.
Don't give you plungers. Like, what is up with that?
What is that?
That is true. They should.
It's like they want you to be morbidly embarrassed.
That's going to be my next gift for you, a travel
A travel plunger.
Please.
That should be a thing.
I feel like you just use the lobby bathroom. That's what I always
Well,
do.
it's funny because he was like, oh yeah, you're going to go in the lobby.
I always send my husband in the lobby. I do.
That's better, actually.
Yeah.
We're also married for 33 years. This is our first trip. And I was like, honey. Anyway, okay. At the end, we always like to ask some like finish the sentence questions.
Ooh, okay.
So we're going to go into that. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. If I were to write a dating manual, the first chapter would be called?
I always wanted to write a book that was called like Me Before We or something like that.
Cute.
Where it's like the first chapter is about finding yourself.
That sounds like a Nicholas Sparks movie. I'm into it.
It does.
Yeah.
But yeah, something about like finding yourself and figuring out what you bring to a relationship before you think about what you want in somebody else.
So smart.
And then into the relationship, I becomes we.
Exactly.
Yeah. Your apartment is our apartment.
That's another
Exactly.
chapter.
Right. Yeah. How to become psycho and make everything there is yours. No, don't listen to me. If I could change one thing about the way people approach dating, it would be?
I think less pressure and less comparison.
Yeah.
Yep.
Comparison is the thief of motherfucking
Just show
joy.
up.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I thought you were going to say just shut up.
No, just show up and just have fun.
Yeah, I always used to say at least it will be a good story. If it's not a good date, at least it can be a fun story for you to tell your friends.
Yeah.
And I always used to say to Danny, a girl's got to eat, or you just make another friend in life.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yes.
Were you someone who became friendly with the guys you went on dates with?
No.
Oh, yeah.
Were you?
A handful. Yeah.
Like I would enjoy the date and I would like talking to them just because I could talk to anybody. But if anything, I feel like that was like a disservice to me because people would think I had such a good time, even if I did.
True, yeah.
Because I was just
There's like
making the most
two
of
that I
it.
can confidently think right now.
Are so similar.
Yeah, we have to hang out.
Really scary.
Really. There's like 2 guys I could think of where if I saw them, I'd be like, hi, oh my God, how are you? And like talk through. But like, there are some times like where I like see someone and I was like, why do I know them? Like, oh my God, I wanted a date with you when I was like 20.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you
Wild.
actually always said you had fun on dates because you just talked away.
Yeah, true. But like, now when I think about it, it's like I was not having fun.
But I do sometimes think about the people who I dated when I was like that age, and I'm like, the person who they like knew me as does like not even exist.
It's not even
anymore.
exist.
It's so weird that when they think of me, that's who they think of.
I don't even know what I talked about on dates. Like the past 2 years, I can remember. But like when I was like early 20s, like what was I talking about?
But
You know
it was
what I
probably
mean?
different. You were probably drinking.
Yeah,
and
a lot of
talking
drinks.
about going out.
Yeah.
And it was just
That's
different
true. Or like,
Yeah,
like
it's
meet
true.
me and my friends at this bar. It was
Yeah.
So much less pressure.
So much
Yeah.
pressure, yeah. We all need to chill. The best way to handle dating nerves is
Calling a friend.
oh
Yeah, I
Love
think
that.
before a date, if you call a friend, even
Yeah.
on like the walk to the date, that would
Yeah.
help me.
yeah, I used to do that actually.
I'm so old, I would say like meditate beforehand.
Oh, that's a really good
Like
one.
just-
When would you?
Yeah.
When have you ever meditated? in
I
your life?
try. My friend's been trying to
I feel like that makes
Really?
you very modern, not old. That's
Yeah.
like-
but just breathe.
Okay, my spiritual bitch. What the hell?
Come back to your breath.
Yeah, you've never told me that. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4.
Okay, Pilates instructor.
Fun fact. You know someone is not right for you when
You don't feel heard.
That's good.
I felt that in my soul.
Mm.
The best. Oh, this is the last one. The best piece of dating advice I've ever received is, or like to share, is.
I think the best piece of dating advice I ever received was that it might not look like what you thought it would look like. Like, don't have
elaborate.
this whole picture in your head of what the relationship is going to look like or
Right.
what it's going to feel like. It's more like just be open to different things versus what you expected.
Right. And let it build. We were just
Mhm.
talking
Let
about
it
that on the
build.
last podcast.
Yeah, Feels like so long ago, but it wasn't. I like the whole like let it build. I forgot who our last guest was. Oh yeah, her name's Jessica. She's so sweet. She was saying like, and I'm curious your thoughts on it too. Is like you might not. Actually, one of my questions I forgot to ask around was like, do you believe there's like a perfect match? And like her whole take was like, no, like you have to work on your relationship in order for it to end up being a perfect match.
I think so too.
Yeah.
And I think that that's so true because people change.
Yeah.
And so it's like if you're a perfect match, what if one of you changes a little bit? Are you suddenly not going to be a perfect match?
Right,
but
you
if
adapt.
you're always working on it and building it, then it doesn't matter. Like even if you change, the relationship changes.
Right.
If you grow, the relationship grows and things like that.
Yeah,
Right.
Agree.
Always moving.
Always moving and grooving. Well, thank you so much for being here with us. This was so
Thank you.
fun.
Thank you. This went by so fast.
So fast,
Thanks for
right?
having
We say this
me.
every time. We're always
Right.
like, yeah, it doesn't have to be an hour. And the next thing you know, I'm looking at my phone. I'm like, oh, it's an hour.
Yeah.
But yeah, this was so great. Where can everyone find you on social? Where's your podcast? All those good things.
You can find me on Instagram at Mostly Dating. I just started a TikTok, so I have like 1 follower.
Love.
But
We'll
it's
be
also
your follower.
Mostly
Yeah,
Dating.
we'll be your second.
3 now.
Yeah.
And anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Love.
Mostly Dating.
Amazing. Like, subscribe, all those good things. Give us 5 stars, as I always nag you to do. And we'll see you next week. Thanks so much.
Enjoy.
you.
Happy weekend.
Thank you so Weekends, Mom. This goes out on Tuesdays.
Oh.